Hi there, this is Scott with Hi-Lux Optics. What follows will be a video of me putting this 1885 Uberti high wall back together after we lost the firing pin, putting this as a demo rifle during SHOT Show. With a new firing pin and it being the last part that's supposed to go in, it took a little while to get this thing back together, and I only made probably 5 to 10 mistakes. But if you have your own 1885 high wall at home, hopefully some of my mistakes will help you put that rifle back together. And in the videos following this one, you'll see us mount scopes such as this from our Malcolm line on the same rifle, take it out to the range, get it zeroed, even talk to a gunsmith about getting everything drilled and tapped on the barrel. Hope this helps you, and looking forward to seeing you in the future. Yeah, that should be on. Oh my God, so excited. If I learned anything as a kid, it's that if I take something apart, I'm able to put it back together, or at least that's what I told my parents. For SHOT Show, we had to remove the firing pin, and unfortunately that got lost. So, now that we have the new firing pin, I don't want to lose this again. We're going to go ahead and do this whole bit in one take, no mistake. Which also means it's going to be a little slow, but if you're rebuilding your 85 high wall at home, hopefully that gives you enough time to follow along. I've gone ahead and labeled most everything. I don't know if you can see it all that well on the camera, but you should be able to find your own parts. I've gone ahead and taped this up. The crossbar in here isn't actually tied in with anything. I think the walls of the receiver just kind of hold it in place. So, very specialized masking tape there. Let's drop, let's make sure. So, firing pin like so. Put the spring on top of that. I didn't see this taken apart, but I'm assuming that the spring is meant to keep the firing pin away from the face, at least until the hammer pushes it past the spring strength. Right now the hammer is in place, so it should be forcing this past the wall. And it does, a little bit. Now, go ahead and reassemble the block. There are surprisingly few parts in this rifle, which actually makes it a lot less scary to work with. Head. There are 2 grooves on the front of this face that the screws press into. I just got to make sure those are lined up and everything should fall right into place. Don't want to scratch that. Everything in here just fits together so smoothly. Let's make sure the pin comes out. Perfect. This is pretty much the last part that goes in, or last part that comes out. So this is going to be the first part that goes in. I just want to make sure it's perfect before I go ahead and spend the rest of the time putting it together. Lovely. Now we have here another one of those cross bolts with no sort of set screw. That's going to be another one just done by pressure. Oops, that's getting stuck in there. There we go. Now, trigger guard fits onto the block. As you pull this down, this gets dropped out. So we're going to tie them together. There's a groove cut out on this side, not on this side. So as you're shooting, this will be on your left that the groove is. That's where we're going to drop this pin into.
Do you mind if I pause for a sec? That pin was out of frame.
Oh, no, I'll just show them the pin again. One take. We got the pin here. We're going to drop the pin in this side because of this groove. That fits together very nicely. Now, this was really one of the major problems in putting everything together and taking it all apart. This slides in there. I can't remember exactly the order that I took it out in, whether it was still stuck to the side of here or whether it fell out separately. This may take a couple tries. We're going to go ahead and take pressure off of this flat spring. And we don't want to scratch the barrel or anything, so cloth on one side, I've got rubber on the other. Let's just try a little fit here. There we go. Now, that was the tough bit. And this has come off. So if you are trying this at home, it is going to take a little bit of work, mostly because this spring, which puts pressure on everything, needs to be moved out of the way. Sure. There's a groove inside of here where that little tooth, I guess you'd call it, fits. Now that that is slid in, attempt number 3. Yes. Now we can slip that off. I'm not going to test this flat spring yet by moving this. First, I want to go ahead and put the bolt holding this in place. There is a set screw right here that corresponds to a groove on this. Just got to make sure it's lined up. And I was wrong. I do have to take a bit more pressure off of it. Almost. Still an almost. I've heard that this spring pressure is honestly one of the toughest parts about putting this rifle together and taking it apart, and I have to say, whoever told me that is 100% right. Keeps coming off. Okay, one last try. This guard here is currently sitting at a bit of an angle, so the far edge of this crossing pin is not slipping in how it should. There we are. I don't want to keep putting undue pressure on this flat spring, so I'm trying to get rid of this clamp whenever I don't need it. Okay. One part out of the way, 2 parts out of the way. This is one of the few set screws for any of the crossing pins that's in this rifle. So I absolutely do not want to lose it. Yeah. Come on now. Sorry guys, I gotta turn this away from the camera for the moment so that I can see it. Nice. Part number 7. So, this one, I do not remember the orientation of perfectly. This sits inside, right about here, but underneath the metal. This crossing pin goes through this part right here. And like most other parts in this gun, it is just held together with tension. So let's see, sliding surfaces there. I guess that you go in like this. Beautiful. Above that, sits a sort of spacer with a screw keeping pressure against it. So, what I'm keeping an eye out for here is some of these areas are worn, so that's where I know something's moving against them. And seeing as this isn't going to move, but the parts inside here are, I'm assuming that this is the side facing the hammer. Lift that up, slip it in. Okay, that is a troubling part. I cannot remember which side goes in front. I'm gonna guess it's you. Oh no, no. So you'll notice that there's a hole cut here that this probably should fit into because there's no threading all the way through to the other side. And the only other screw portion up here is already taken by a screw that pushes down against the top side of this. I'm not sure why this particular part is made mobile, so that is something we're going to have to test once we get some rounds in here. Very cool. So now, if you look in here, the part we dropped in 2 steps ago is pushed by this flat piece of metal here. Beautiful. Now I was a bit of a fool and I went ahead and cocked the hammer when I did that. So I'm going to now install the professional decocking mechanism. All right. This slides in here on some grooves. Okay, so I'm short about 1/4 inch. Wonder. There we go. What I was doing there is manually relieving the tension on the Hey there, everybody. Sorry about that delay. I got a little bit ahead of myself. I didn't realize that the camera had cut out. So let me go back a few steps. Da, 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 da. Okay, back to it. So, this is the trigger mechanism. There's this groove inside, there we go, that a set of pins on this spring thingy fits into. And once you get that settled in, should be able to push it and work both. That's how you know everything's fine. As we feed it in, we're actually going to need to lift this up over that weird angular piece that we stuck in on this pin. So to do that, I push a little bit here, then the rest of the way with the trigger. Not too far, because that happens. So, let's find the groove again. Like so. We're lined up. Now, lift this out of the way a little bit. Push that, hold it. And we're in. I'm going to go ahead and test this right quick, just by loosely fitting it. Let's make sure that the hammer and the action work. Cool. Cocks all the way. Alrighty. Let's get that tied in there. Another thing to take note of, a mistake I made trying to reassemble this in the past. The flat spring that sits in here doesn't look like a flat spring, and I know I was calling it a spacer earlier. I was lucky enough to get it on the right side. Honestly, just make sure it's bent in the right direction, and you will know, because if it's going in the wrong direction, you won't be able to cock it. If it's going the right direction, you can. If it ends up being the wrong direction, slide this whole mechanism back out, undo the screw here, flip that piece over, put it in, tie it all back down, and you should be fine. Now, let's make sure everything is tightened up before we finish assembling this. Now the stock fits in like so. Oops. Nice. Using my very expert terminology, I called this the upper side rear stock attachment screw, which I don't know what they call it in their manual, but by golly, that's what it is. Probably be much better all around if I was using a proper set of tools, but if you have your Leatherman handy, you should be just fine. I'm not going to tighten out the rest of the way until I put in the other aptly named underside rear stock screw. That sits right in here. These just go into wood, so if you're planning on changing your stock out later, or, I don't know, it got wet and you messed up your sizing, you should be fine. Just kind of force it together. Very nice. You're going to want your stock to go on tightly so that this isn't wobbling around, messing up your zero when you're trying to fire. Last part here. Let's put on the handguard screw. This slides into a dovetail that's just underneath it. This is where your flat spring fits. Everything should be lined up. Feels nice and tight. If we take a look inside, getting caught on my own audio cables. That little wobbly bit in there helps extract the casing, or actually does all the work for you. That wiggles when it should and doesn't when it shouldn't. That's nice. Hammer comes back, locks properly. Let's try. You see this trigger's jumping. Very fun. So, it's got a couple moving parts, but all in all, that is really fun. I want to do that again. I'm going to change out this stock at some point, and I want to pull this whole thing apart and re-grease it and do everything else. But for now, this seems to be working just fine. That is how you reassemble a Uberti 1885 high wall, currently chambered in 4570.